phone rang shrilly, shattering the quiet evening I'd been enjoying with a glass of wine and a book. I frowned, glancing at the clock. It was nearly midnight. "Hello?" Ellis's voice came cautiously from the other room. I strained to make out the faint murmur of the person on the other end, but couldn't discern any words. Something made the hair on the back of my neck prickle, though. An uneasy feeling twisted in my gut as Ellis's tone changed from its usual casual confidence to something else, something almost nervous. No, she's asleep," he said quickly in a hushed voice. "I stepped out to take this call." My suspicions spiked as I heard him rustling around, clearly trying to mask his conversation from me. Why would he lie about me being awake unless— No, don't go there, Avery, not without proof, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I set my wine glass down and crept quietly to the bedroom door, pressing my ear against it. Ellis's voice was muffled but tense, rushed, whispering urgently into the phone. My heart pounded in my ears as the implications crashed over me like a crushing wave. Was my husband having an affair? I stumbled back, letting out a choked gasp. The bedroom door flew open and Ellis nearly plowed into me, eyes widening in panic as he registered the look on my face. "Avery, I was just— Who is she?" I demanded, feeling lightheaded as betrayal wormed its way through my veins. She? What? No, it was nothing, just work stuff. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard, refusing to meet my eyes. "Work stuff?" I scoffed bitterly. "At midnight? And you had to lie about me being awake? Don't insult my intelligence, Ellis." His shoulders slumped in defeat as I watched the guilt play out across his features. "Avery, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I cried, moisture pricking my eyes as my worst fear solidified into reality. "That you're sneaking around, lying to me? Cheating on me?" "No, God, no, baby, I'm not cheating, I swear." He reached out as if to pull me into an embrace, but I shoved him away viciously. "Don't you dare lie to me again," I seethed, shaking from head to toe with a potent mix of rage and heartbreak. "Not when I know the truth. How could you do this to me? To us?" My voice broke as I choked back a sob, motioning to the framed family photos that mocked me from every tabletop. Ellis dropped his head into his hands with a heavy sigh. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were haunted. "You're right. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm so sorry, Avery." His apology struck me as hollow, empty words unable to undo the devastating blow his deceit had landed. A tear slipped down my cheek as the reality crashed over me. My husband was lying, cheating, and our life would never be the same. Ellis's apology did little to quell the fury simmering in my veins over the next few days. I vacillated between periods of cold, seething silence and explosive confrontations where I raged until I was hoarse, demanding the truth about his infidelity. Through it all, he maintained his cowardly stance, admitting to indiscretions but refusing to provide any details about this mystery woman he'd betrayed me with. His evasiveness only stoked the fires of my anger and suspicion. I knew I needed proof if I was going to uncover the depth of his lies and betrayal. The thought of being made a fool by him any longer was unbearable. So I started watching him like a hawk, logging his comings and goings, taking note of any late nights at work or unexplained phone calls. I installed tracking software on his phone and laptop, allowing me to monitor his texts, emails, and online activity. At first, I saw nothing too egregious, a few lingering glances at social media photos of attractive women, some flirty, if innocuous messages to female coworkers and friends. Ellis had always been a shameless flirt, a fact that never bothered me until his unfaithfulness showed how easily he could cross strict boundaries. Then one day, I saw it, a scheduled calendar notification for a dinner meeting on a Thursday evening, with a female name I didn't recognize. I marched into the kitchen where Ellis was eating a late breakfast. "Working late again tonight?" I asked in a deceptively casual tone as I poured myself a cup of coffee. He glanced up at me briefly before returning his gaze to his plate. "Yeah, got an important dinner meeting with a new client, actually." "I see. Well, good luck making that sale or whatever," I replied breezily, turning to leave the kitchen. Before I made it out of the room, though, I stopped and turned back slowly. "One more thing." Ellis looked up at me warily. "Who the hell is Bianca?" His fork slipped from his hand, clattering against the plate as his face drained of color. "What did you say?" "Bianca. I repeated, my voice hard. That's the name listed for your little dinner meeting tonight. Is she the client you'll be wining and dining? I took a step closer, leaning in. Or is she the woman you've been cheating on me with? Ellis gaped at me, momentarily stunned, before jumping to his feet. Avery, wait, how did you even... I found out, I snarled, advancing on him as fury roared in my ears. Everything, Ellis. I know about your dirty little secret. To his credit, he didn't even try to deny it any longer. He just looked at me hopelessly before his gaze dropped. It's not what you think, he began, but I wasn't having any of it. Save your pathetic lies, I spat. I don't give a damn about your excuses or who this Bianca slut is. What I care about is making you pay for betraying me and our family. This marriage is over, Ellis. He opened his mouth again, but I held up a hand to silence him. Don't worry, you'll have plenty of opportunities to explain yourself, to a judge during our divorce proceedings. With that, I whirled on my heel and stormed out, fresh determination blazing within me. If Ellis thought I would simply roll over and let this go, he was severely underestimating me. I was just getting started. The next evening, I strode up the front walk of my sister Harper's house, jaw clenched and hands balled into fists at my sides. My anger was a raging inferno after confirming the worst. Ellis's mistress was none other than my own flesh and blood. Harper opened the door with a broad smile that immediately faltered when she saw my expression. Avery, what's wrong? Don't act so innocent with me, I snarled, shoving past her into the house. We both know exactly what's going on. Her eyes widened almost comically as I wheeled on her, stabbing an accusatory finger in her face. How could you, Harper? How could you sleep with my husband? She at least had the decency to look abashed, shrinking back from my fury. Avery, I never meant to hurt you. Well, you did, I cried, my voice cracking with anguish. You stabbed me in the back in the most painful way possible. My own damn sister. It just happened, she said weakly. One moment of weakness that turned into a year-long affair, I exploded, watching her flinch. Don't try denying it. I've seen Ellis's messages to his precious Bianca. A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by my ragged breathing. Harper opened her mouth, closed it again. Finally, she sighed heavily. You're right. I'm not going to try and justify it anymore. The truth is, Ellis and I fell for each other. Hard. And we acted on those feelings, even though we knew how destructive it could be. White-hot fury flashed through me, and I lunged forward, grabbing Harper's shoulders and giving her a rough shake. You both knew you were betraying and destroying me, and you just didn't care. Tears filled Harper's eyes, but she didn't try to break free from my grip. I never wanted to see you get hurt, Avery. I do love you. I just love Ellis, too. I recoiled as if she'd slapped me, stumbling back a step. My own eyes stung with unshed tears, and my throat felt tight. Aish, how could you love him more than your own sister? I rasped out, chest heaving. What kind of person does that make you? An uneasy silence stretched between us, tension practically crackling in the air. Finally, Harper just shook her head sadly. I don't know what to say except, I'm sorry. I wish I had a better excuse or explanation for my actions, but I don't. She drew herself up, squaring her shoulders as her jaw tensed. I won't insult your intelligence by lying or making promises I can't keep. Do you truly love him then? I asked, disgust evident in my tone. Are you willing to sacrifice everything, your marriage, your family, our relationship, for a lying, cheating bastard like Ellis? Some of the old defiant spark returned to Harper's eyes as she lifted her chin proudly. Yes, I do love him, with everything I have. He makes me happier than I've ever been before. I know that makes me selfish and awful in your eyes, but I can't change how I feel. White-hot anger rushed through me again, and I fought the urge to slap her across that self-righteous face. Very well, then. I bit out in clipped tones. If you're both willing to throw our family away over this sordid affair, then you've already lost me. Don't expect any more sisterly love or loyalty from me. With that, I turned on my heel and stormed out, letting the door slam shut behind me with a resounding thud. Let the gloves come off. Harper and Ellis wanted to destroy everything we'd built together as a family. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives, and I would make sure they paid dearly for it. The next few days passed in a blur of icy silences, bitter confrontations, and long stretches of numb disbelief over Ellis and Harper's betrayal. I oscillated between periods of gut-wrenching grief over my disintegrating marriage and searing hot rage at the two people I had once loved and trusted most in this world. Through it all, I forced myself to remain outwardly calm, to channel my inner turmoil into laser-focused determination. I would not be the hysterical, jilted wife throwing herself at her husband's feet, begging for him to stay. That would only give Ellis more power over me, and after his cruel deception, I refused to relinquish one more ounce of control. No, I would take the reins firmly in my hands and chart the course of revenge that he and my wretched sister deserved. Step 1 was gathering intel and documentation of their affair, saving incriminating texts and emails, recording phone conversations where they stated their love and intentions to leave their spouses for each other. I installed hidden cameras in our home that captured them in intimate moments. Next, I quietly lined up an aggressive divorce attorney behind Ellis's back and got my financial ducks in a row. I knew the proceedings would get vicious and that slimeball would try every dirty trick to limit any settlement. But I was determined to take him to the cleaners, the big house, the retirement savings, everything. After that disastrous blow-up with Harper, I'd cut off all contact with her and my parents despite their desperate attempts to intervene. The last thing I wanted was for my traitorous family to try swaying me from my path. It only hardened my resolve. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Ellis asked one morning as we silently went through our morning routines of coffee and avoiding each other's gaze. "The divorce, I mean?" I glanced over at him coolly. "What do you think? You made your choices loud and clear. Now it's time to face the consequences." He ran a frustrated hand through his tousled hair. "Avery, I never wanted to hurt you. You have to know that. What happened between Harper and I, it was a mistake, one that quickly spiraled out of control before we could stop it." "Mistake?" I echoed in a deadly soft tone, setting my coffee mug down on the counter with excessive care. "Is that what you call lying to me every single day, sleeping with my own sister behind my back, betraying me and everything our marriage stood for?" My voice rose. "Just a silly little mistake that shouldn't have any consequences for your actions?" Ellis flinched under the weight of my furious stare, swallowing hard. "Of course not. I know I massively screwed up, but you have to understand this was never part of any plan. Harper and I, we fell in love, hard and fast. Those intense feelings just blindsided us." "Oh, spare me the love-sick romantic drivel," I spat in disgust. "You're both selfish liars who threw our family away for a fling, and now you'll be losing a hell of a lot more than that." I leaned in close, voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "I have everything on both of you, the videos, texts, emails, photos from hidden cameras, every dirty little secret, just waiting to be exposed to the world if you dare fight me on this divorce." Ellis's eyes widened in horror as the gravity of my words sank in. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a gasping fish. "So go ahead, try to take me for everything," I continued, feeling a vicious surge of vindictive satisfaction. "It will only ensure you and your precious Harper end up losing it all. Jobs, friends, family, reputations. You wanted to destroy our lives? Well, now it's my turn to set the world on fire and burn you both to the ground." We stared at each other in tense silence, a yawning chasm of hatred and finality stretching between us. Ellis was the first to look away, shoulders sagging in defeat. "You're making a terrible mistake, Avery," he said hollowly. "One you'll regret for the rest of your life." I simply sneered at his empty threat. "No, Ellis, the mistake was yours, and you're just getting started in paying for it." "Are you sure about this, Avery?" My mother's worried voice crackled over the phone line. "There's no going back once you expose them publicly like that." "I'm sure, Mom." My voice was steely with resolve. "Ellis and Harper made their choices. Now it's time they face the consequences in front of everyone." She sighed heavily. "I just don't want to see our family torn apart more than it already is. Your father and I love you both so much." "If you loved me, you'd be on my side," I retorted sharply, not making excuses for the two people who utterly betrayed me. An uncomfortable silence fell between us before Mom spoke again, her tone pleading. "We're not taking sides, honey. We just want to see if this can be resolved another way, without such drastic actions." I scoffed loudly. There is no other way. Not after what they did to me, to my marriage. You'll see. With that, I ended the call abruptly and turned my attention back to Max, who was playing contentedly on the living room floor. My sweet 8-year-old boy, blessedly unaware of the turmoil unfurling around him. I felt another pang of sadness that he would inevitably get caught in the crossfire soon. But it was better that than allowing that lying, cheating scumbag of a father to try and manipulate him against me. Later that evening, the entire extended family started gathering at my parents' place for a celebration of my dad's retirement from his longtime job. I greeted my aunts, uncles, and cousins with a bright, brittle smile concealing the turmoil churning beneath the surface. Finally, the guest of dishonor arrived, Ellis striding through the door with Harper on his arm, both of them exchanging tense whispers and avoiding my piercing gaze. No doubt they had expected this to be just another light-hearted family occasion to continue sneaking around behind everyone's backs. Well, they were in for a rude awakening. The time for lies and deception was over. "Ellis! Harper! There you two are!" I called out in saccharine tones as I made my way over to them. They turned to me warily as the murmurs around us quieted, sensing the tension in the air. "We were all just discussing what a perfect, loving couple you've been pretending to be," I continued in a louder voice, plastering on a sickly sweet smile as I slowly shook my head. "The model husband and devoted sister. Although, I have to say, you deserve Oscars for those award-winning acting performances." Ellis paled as he realized where this was going. "Avery, don't," he began in a low, urgent voice, but I barreled right over him. "Did you two really think you could keep up the facade forever?" I asked, letting my gaze sweep over the confused and concerned crowd. "That I wouldn't eventually discover the truth about your torrid little love affair and disgusting betrayal?" A collective gasp went around the room, quickly followed by a rising clamor of shocked voices as Ellis and Harper stood there, stricken, like deer in the headlights. I could see the desperate panic in Harper's eyes, the way her hands trembled at her sides. Good. Let them finally face the harsh light of truth after their web of lies. "How could you do this, you two?" I thundered over the din, all semblance of calm shattering. I wheeled on Ellis, poking an accusing finger in his face as tears burned in my eyes. "You swore vows to me, promised to be a faithful, loving husband. And what did you do instead? Screw my own baby sister behind my back like some cheap whore." I turned toward Harper next, chest heaving with ragged breaths as the dam finally burst. "And you, my own flesh and blood. You were supposed to love me, be loyal to me, but instead you betrayed me in the worst possible way a sibling ever could." Everything I'd been holding in for months, the shock, the pain, the rage, came pouring out in a torrent of screamed vitriol. I barely registered the distraught cries of my parents and family, or Ellis's stammered attempts at defending himself. I was a woman scorned and unleashed, raining hell on the two people who had selfishly destroyed everything I held sacred. As I finally wound down, hoarse and shaking, reality set in. The shocked, pitying looks from my loved ones, the visceral hurt and humiliation etched on Ellis and Harper's faces. The masquerade was over. The truth was stripped bare for all to see, and there would be no going back. The silence that followed my explosive outburst at the family gathering was deafening. No one dared make a sound as the ugly truth about Ellis and Harper's affair hung heavy in the air. I stood trembling with anger and adrenaline, glaring at the two of them with a look of pure loathing. Ellis's face had drained of all color, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. Harper, meanwhile, had dissolved into heaving sobs, fat tears streaming down her cheeks. Finally, Ellis seemed to find his voice. "Avery, oh God, I'm so sorry," he croaked out, anguish carved into his features. "You have every right to be furious with me, with us. But please, this isn't the way." "Shut up," I snarled, cutting him off. "Don't you dare play the victim here and try groveling for sympathy after what you did to me, to our family." "I never meant to hurt you," Harper choked out between gasps for air. "It just happened, and then—" "Oh, spare me the excuses," I rounded on her with blistering fury. "You stabbed me in the back and destroyed everything, all for your selfish desires. Was throwing our whole lives away worth it just to sleep with my husband?" Harper flinched as if I'd struck her, her cries rising in pitch. Ellis moved towards her instinctively, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. The sight of their intimate embrace, even now, was like a vicious knife twist in my heart. "Don't you get it?" he rasped out, suddenly looking utterly defeated. "We're in love, Avery. Deeply, madly, in a way I can't even describe. None of this was part of some malicious plan to hurt you." "That's exactly why you're both spineless cowards," I shouted over his pleading. "Any fool can see you acted only out of selfish desire with no thought for the consequences. Well, now you'll face them like the shattered vows, broken family, and ruined lives you caused." There was a heavy pause as my venomous words seemed to sink in, forcing them to truly reckon with the devastation they had unleashed. That's when the fighting started again. First between the two of them. "This is your fault, you idiot," Harper wailed, shoving Ellis hard in the chest. "If you hadn't kept leading me on and making me fall for you, none of this would be happening." "My fault." He gaped at her incredulously, all traces of remorse vanishing under a cloud of anger. "You threw yourself at me every chance you got, and I may be a liar and a cheating piece of garbage, but at least I'm not screwing my own brother-in-law." The vicious jabs and accusations flew back and forth as their twisted love descended into an explosive meltdown in front of everyone. I watched in dark satisfaction as the depth of their betrayal and selfishness was laid bare before our stunned families. My parents' devastated faces only hardened my resolve. If anyone deserved to turn their backs on Ellis and Harper, to disown them, it was Mom and Dad, after their own children had done this to us. At last, it was too much. Mom collapsed into a chair, burying her face in trembling hands as racking sobs shook her shoulders. Dad immediately went to comfort her, glaring daggers at his wayward daughters as the weight of their deception became too much. Even my sweet cousin Jennifer, barely out of high school, couldn't contain her revulsion any longer. "You're both just awful people," she spat with uncharacteristic venom, lips curled in disgust as she stared between Harper and Ellis. "How could you do that to family? Don't you have any loyalty, any shame?" The barbs and condemnations continued to fly as the full extent of their betrayal echoed through every horrified, hate-filled word. I stood observing it all with a sense of grim vindication, allowing the resentment and bitterness to well up within me. This was precisely the wake-up call those two selfish liars needed to face. No more delusions of their supposed romance being some grand love affair, just the harsh, brutal consequences of shattering the lives of everyone around them to indulge their twisted cravings. And it was only just the beginning of what they had coming. In the weeks following that explosive family confrontation, I launched into full revenge mode against Ellis and Harper. With the truth exposed, I had no reason to hold anything back. My first order of business was securing a formidable divorce lawyer, one with a reputation as a ruthless barracuda in the courtroom. Ellis tried playing hardball as I expected, dragging his feet on proceedings and demanding ridiculous settlement terms that would leave me with next to nothing. Big mistake. My new legal team tore his case to shreds, using the mountain of evidence I had gathered to prove his adulterous ways and reprehensible behavior. Ellis's tech company started receiving the incriminating videos and emails detailing his affair, putting his entire career at risk. "This is going too far, Avery," he exploded when I informed him of my latest salvo. "You're destroying my entire life over one mistake." I simply laughed mercilessly in his face. "One mistake? You threw away our whole family, our marriage vows for cheap thrills with my own sister. Don't come crying to me about fair consequences now." In the end, Ellis had no choice but to concede complete defeat lest I air every last shred of dirty laundry from the affair. The divorce was finalized with me receiving a massive lump sum payment, the house and car in my name, and full custody of Max. Ellis was allowed only supervised visitation after I raised serious concerns he could try indoctrinating our son with his sordid behavior as a serial cheater. My lawyer promised to keep meticulous records of any future incidents or attempts by that snake to slander me or turn Max against his mother. I may have lost my husband and my sister, but I ensured neither of them would escape without feeling the harsh sting of consequences. The real pièce de résistance, though, was the social and professional demolition I executed against them both. I strategically distributed evidence of their affair, videos, emails, testimonials to Harper's school colleagues and parent groups, ensuring everyone knew the married teacher had been sleeping with her own brother-in-law behind her husband's back. Within weeks, she was fired in disgrace, and her reputation was left in ruins in the community she had worked so hard to build a noble career in. Her husband Theo predictably filed for divorce as well once the truth came out, taking his devastated fury out on his lying, cheating wife. I showed no mercy for my wretched sister. Why should I, after how thoroughly she betrayed and destroyed me? Meanwhile, I made sure all of Ellis's industry contacts and professional circles were made aware that the hotshot tech genius they admired was a sniveling adulterer who had burned his own family to the ground for cheap side action. His company's clients began dropping him thanks to human resource violations from the incriminating evidence. Within a few short months, Ellis went from confidently leading his company's latest expansion to just another disgraced cheater looking for whatever job he could find to scrape by. The karmatic scales of the universe had never been more perfectly balanced. Watching those two selfish, deceitful liars lose everything — jobs, reputations, self-respect, family relationships, financial security — brought me a savage sense of satisfaction. They had tried destroying my life and my future. It was only fair I burned both of their worlds to the ground in return. Finally, after so many weeks of ruthless combat, it was over. The twin pillars of my former life with Ellis and Harper lay in smoldering rubble around me as I surveyed the aftermath of my handiwork. They had been well and truly leveled, their betrayal avenged 10 times over. Those two snakes could wallow in the ashes of their sordid mistakes, alone and disgraced. Meanwhile, I would rise like a fiery phoenix from the ashes, having exacted my hard-won justice. With Max by my side, I would sever every last thread binding me to that cancerous past. It was finally time to embrace the future, one free of their corrosive lies and empty promises, shaped solely by my resilience and determination. A new chapter was finally beginning. It was a crisp autumn morning as I stood on the neat brick steps outside the courthouse, taking a deep, steadying breath. The past several months of my life had been consumed by furious legal battles, laser-focused on systematically dismantling Ellis and Harper's lives, just as they had torn apart my own family. But it was finally over now. I had emerged victorious, securing everything I had fought for: financial security, custody of Max, and ensuring those two snakes faced harsh consequences, both socially and professionally, for their selfish betrayal. More importantly, I had regained my sense of self-worth and inner strength that they tried to crush. As I watched Ellis slink out of the courthouse, head down and shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt a profound sense of closure wash over me. This sorry specimen was a far cry from the arrogant, self-assured tech wunderkind he had been when our marriage fell apart. Now he was just another disgraced cheater having to scrape by to survive. Good. He had brought this wholly upon himself. Let him be a living, breathing reminder to never take loved ones for granted or break sacred vows for fleeting lust. His sprawling ambition and ego had been knocked down permanently, justice ruthlessly served. He glanced up and caught my eye, seeming almost startled by the look of finality and triumph on my face. Perhaps he had hoped I would eventually soften, show him some last shred of mercy or solace after all the carnage. Well, he was the fool for thinking that. I owed him nothing but the brutal retribution I had enacted. One final, dismissive look from me was all he would ever get before I turned on my heel and strode away without a second glance. He and Harper were firmly in my rear view now, just tainted remnants of the shattered life they had obliterated. It was time to move forward and embrace my fresh start, beginning with dropping Max off at school on my way to work. "Hi, buddy." I greeted him with a warm smile, pulling him into a tight embrace. He grinned at me in that sweet, innocent way only an 8-year-old can manage. "How does it feel to have your mom taking you to school finally instead of a nanny?" "It feels awesome," he exclaimed, squeezing me fiercely. My heart clenched at both the joy and melancholy in his voice. My poor son had been through so much upheaval during the implosion of our family, dealing with the devastation over his father's deceit. No more, I silently vowed. From here on out, it was just going to be me showing up for Max every single day, like a parent should. No more revolving door of nannies or being mentally checked out. Just stable, reliable love and support to heal the wounds in his little heart. I dropped him off at his classroom with a lingering hug before heading to my new job. Thanks to my substantial divorce settlement, I hadn't needed to find employment right away. But I knew getting back into a career would be crucial for personal fulfillment and providing Max a positive example of a strong, self-reliant woman. My first week at the marketing firm went by in a blur of trying to absorb info dumps and get my bearings. I couldn't help feeling a spark of excitement at the prospect of throwing myself into something new and challenging, utilizing my skills in a way I hadn't in years. Finally, on Friday evening, I returned home, bone-tired but satisfied from proving my capabilities and value on a high-profile client pitch. Max was already home, happily snacking on carrot sticks at the kitchen counter. "Hey, Mom," he called when he spotted me. "How was your big, important meeting?" I couldn't help but smile at the earnest, admiring look on his face. "It went great, Bud. I already feel like I'm kicking butt at this new job." Max's eyes went comically wide. "You said a bad word." "Oops," I laughed, ruffling his hair. "You're right, poor choice of words. Let's just say I feel like a total rock star at work so far." "Cool," Max grinned, showing that adorable gap-toothed smile. In that moment, everything I had endured, the anger, sadness, struggle for justice, and hollow victories over Ellis and Harper, faded away. All that mattered was this new reality finally emerging, one of stability and optimism for what the future held. I was a respected career woman and single mom, working hard to build something lasting and positive for my son. No cheating, absentee husband, or disloyal relatives to sabotage this fresh life we were forging, brick by brick. It was just me and Max now, a duo tackling the world on our terms and rising together from the ashes of betrayal. Our story of struggle and vengeance would always be a part of our history, but it was the first chapter to an incredible new beginning, and I couldn't wait to see how the rest unfolded.